forgot to say that you may sit down 5 minutes ago. Anyway, thank you to this ensemble of the South Netherlands Philharmonic Orchestra. We will hear later more from them. I would like to welcome you indeed on this very hot afternoon. It was already a challenge in these togas to walk from the Minderbrudersberg to the theater. Thank you to my colleagues who were solidaric. I think some of them chose to come on a different spot in a shirt. Dear Governor Bovens, dear members of the provincial government, dear Mayor Pen ter Strake, representatives of public institutions, foreign governments, dear professors, staff and students of the university, dear guests. We are almost 40 years old, which means as a university our age is still lower than the average age of our employees, and certainly that of with our students I won't take into account. But after 39 years, we are now on the road to our 40th anniversary, which of course we will celebrate on 15th of January of next year. And maybe it's good to reflect on these 39 or 40 years, and why, you may ask, why is 40 such a interesting number? Well, I can quote Benjamin Franklin here, who said, at 20 years of age, the will rules, at 30 years the wit, and at 40 years the judgment. So it's probably a good time to judge, to look back, to look in the future, and during our Jubilee year, that, as I said, will officially start with our Lustrum in January, we will do that. And of course, if you forgive me, I think if you look now, it's still amazing what happened in these 39 years, and the people who have set up this university and have built it up in the 70s didn't imagine that after these 39 or 40 years we are where we are now. I've looked, for example, on old strategic papers that suggested that this university probably would have a limit of 5,000, 6,000 students, and clearly the founding fathers and mothers wouldn't have imagined that today we have 16,000 students. We are, according to some, the fastest growing in terms of reputation young university in the world, and we are the most international university in the Netherlands. Many factors have contributed to that, but I think one of the factors, if I look back to our history, was from the start, this university met a lot of opposition. There was from the beginning this question, is this university needed? Do we yet need another medical school? And every faculty, every program that has been built to this day has met this kind of question, sometimes opposition. Is this needed? Is this an added benefit? And every time I think this was a stimulus to build further, and I think every time until now the university has shown that we add something to the knowledge landscape in this country and beyond. But at 40 there's also danger. Yeah, of course with 40 you become officially middle-aged, then you turn complacent, too much becomes routine, and the danger is that indeed you lose this edge that this university has preserved over so many years. Now, it's very fortunate that in the Netherlands at this time there's not, for universities, not a lot of time to develop routines, because we are really get a lot of interest. There are many initiatives, agendas from the so-called top sectors to the national science agenda, developments from the student loan system to the performance agreements. And in fact, it sometimes feels like the university get offered a lot of new clothes. And that's nice, because then sometimes it's good to change your clothes, to do something different. The question is, how does this make us feel? And if I stay with this picture of the new clothes, then let's imagine universities getting these new programs and agendas. They're getting these news, they go to the tailor. So we go to the tailor, and then we put our new suit on, and then the tailor says, oh, this is your new suit, looks beautiful. And he said, wait a moment, this arm here is a little too long. The tailor then says, that's no problem, sir. You just hold the arm like this and bend it a little. See, it fits perfectly. Then you say, well, no, my collar is kind of edging here. The tailor says, no problem, sir. You hold your head a little like this. See, it fits wonderfully. But now my leg is a bit long. And then the tailor says, no problem, you just bend your knee a bit like this, and then see the suit fits perfectly. Now you're barely able to walk, and you leave the shop, and as you hobble and humble across the street, two people on the other side see you. And one says, look at this poor cripple, he barely can walk. Then the other says, yes, but he has a great tailor. And I think now we're laughing because you think it's the tailor who is at fault, but I think it's also our responsibility to say when the suit is not fitting or needs to be adapted. And I think one of the challenges that universities in the Netherlands have, that we respond to these well-willing and well-meaning initiatives in a way says they also need to fit us, and we need to fit into them, and we must also make our voice known as an academic community with the best purpose, because in the end, the suits need to fit, the programs need to fit us, and they should not make us bend over or walk not in a straight way. And I think that's very important, walking straight. And at Maastricht University, I believe we have responded to a lot of these initiatives very well. We have built our community not only internally, but particularly also with our external friends and members. And I just want to mention a number of these initiatives here, which really were joint efforts, both from the university and from our stakeholders in the region. If you think about the so-called Kennis Us initiative, the Brightlands development, with really the motto, knowledge crossing borders. And borders can mean borders of our province, but also borders between knowledge institutions, the economic sector, the public sector. If I look at some of the projects that has been started, really addressing research questions to needs of this region, for example, Movare, which focuses on healthy eating and sport in a socially challenged region of our province, or on ITEM, an institute that specifically deals with cross-border and border region issues in legal, economical, and also social sense. Or the many initiatives from our students that are really focusing on building bridges. So I think the topic that we have chosen today, and we hear later more by Professor Penter from Berlin, is really that this community element, the academic community, and also our link to our external community is extremely important if we really want to have this straight walk and we are ready to respond adequately to all these new efficient initiatives, all our new clothes. So I think community building will be an important, I think, strategy, an important program for us in the future. And of course, in this year, 2015, 2016, it's not only the road to our 40th anniversary, it's also the start of our new strategic program that will hopefully be presented in 1 year, exactly in 1 year, and the spot at which we start in the 1st of January 2017. And as I believe this strategic program should not be a solitary or even autistic exercise, we will kick it off today to start a discussion also with our community, internal and external, what should be key elements of this program. And I think it's important also to listen to needs, wishes, plans, so well from our internal community, but also from our external partners. And I would like to kick off this discussion by just giving you some food for thought, what could be elements of such a program to stimulate the discussion and also to begin the process of having this discussion over the next few months. Well, what should we deal with? Of course, first and foremost, our university should keep focus on education and on learning, and I deliberately name it learning because I think that's the problem-based learning approach that was installed in this university by its founding fathers is something we need not only to preserve, but also we need to think to bring it to the future, to make it future-proof. And of course, after 40 years, things get a bit diluted and so on. So I think there we need to have special attention. And of course, we have across our university and many faculties groups that do research in education, but I think it's also good to have some joint activities. And certainly the recently opened EdLab, which is the Maastricht Institute for Educational Innovation, is an instrument to really bring these many different ideas together to create a platform for open dialogue, for engagement, and for most and foremost to discuss what is important in this education, in this learning process, and to define what's the quality of it. And quality, I think, it's a very important element. So I think this is obviously in our university, particularly in our university, a very important focus for a new strategic program. The second one, like in many other universities, is research. And there has been a lot of discussion recently whether universities should not call themselves research university, because per definition universities focus on education and research. But I think also in research the discussion here is the question of quality. How do we evaluate quality? There has been some discussions about the so-called rendementsdenken, that we focus too much on quantity and not on quality, and indeed this is the discussion that should be led here. I just wanted to remind you, a few years ago when I was still in Berlin, we had a discussion in our faculty about exactly the same question. Can we measure research? Should we measure research? And I remember that a colleague of mine from the Charité got up very adamantly when we had a seminar with somebody from the Leiden Institute of Bibliometric Analysis and said, no, I refuse to publish because for me research is really like love, it's something emotional, and I refuse to publish, I refuse to get it measured. And then this gentleman from this Leiden Institute said, you know, if it's really like love, I should tell you one thing, if the quantity is zero, the quality is not relevant. And I think that's also something we have to keep in mind in our discussion. The second important point that is happening now in the Netherlands is, of course, the National Science Agenda. And I think it was a very bold move by our ministry to really ask everybody in the country, what should research do? What is the role of science? What topics should be really chosen to focus on? And indeed, after this process, 10 areas with 100 different topics have been sorted out, and they will be, I think, the basis for research policy, which I think is good to raise awareness in the population about the importance of research and the importance of research topics. There's also some inherent danger in it, and the danger is if you use this agenda to limit research, to limit the freedom of research, the basic research that we need, because a lot of time basic research, fundamental research, has led to the most innovative results, and that also could be applied. The second danger is that, like it's common in the Netherlands, there are a lot of brilliant new ideas, but it always has to be paid from the same budget, the famous cigar from the own box. And this is what happens possibly here again, and that means that there is a carve-out from the many other initiatives. And if I look at the funding percentage of the NWO, which is in some areas now down to 7%, that means 93% of all applications will not get funded. That means that a lot of excellent applications will not get funded for reasons that are not dealing with excellence. So this is, I think, the field that we need to discuss also for our new strategic program, how we want to position ourselves. The third element I would like to mention is internationalization. We are an international university and we continue to do so, but internationalization is not the amount of foreign passports you collect, it's not the amount of foreign students that you have, it is really about the international classroom. It is about bringing in culture, different backgrounds from international students in the problem-based learning process, and that's what we need to focus on in the future. We also need to think, what is the skills that we want to offer our students? Now we are officially a bilingual university, Dutch and English, and with much success we offer free Dutch language courses to foreign students. And so 85% of our foreign students take this basic language class. Then maybe we should also offer language classes in German or French to our Dutch students. So in the idea that we probably in the end will have a student population that basically is trilingual, because that not only fits within this international profile, but also makes them accessible for the labor market in the Euro region. So this is something that we have to discuss. Labor market brings me to the next point, which probably will be a unique program point in the strategic program, and that's called employability. I've recently given an interview in Die Zeit, a German weekly newspaper, where I was accused that employability is not really academic. Well, I would disagree with that. I think while it's of course nice that you have academic freedom in this environment, at some point it is also time to give something back to society, to go into employment and do good in a job with your academic education, with the Bildung that you have achieved at a university. So I think we need to think as a university how we can really fulfill the needs of the students and ask us more and more, where will I have a job after I finish my program here in Maastricht? Then, of course, our regional engagement, the regional community. We had a fantastic seminar this morning with a lot of initiatives here in Maastricht from students, from inhabitants from Maastricht, from the so-called Buurtplatformen, and this showed that this community building process, which is the topic of our day-to-day, is something we really also should focus on. And I was recently in Göttingen, a famous German university town, and then you come out of this station, and there's a board on the station that says, Göttingen, Stadt des Wissens, knowledge city. And maybe this is also something that in our region, in Maastricht, should achieve, but it should be more than something, a board hanging on the station. The question is, what is this university city? I know that our mayor is very interested in that. I would say, as the suggestion for the discussion, a university city is a city where you don't see the difference between the university and the rest of the city. And there are areas that we have developed really as common ground. And one example for this is the developments on the Tapijn-Kaserne, where we create an environment together with the city, together with the province, that is owned by everybody. That is owned by the university, but it also offers spaces for the citizens to enjoy the park, the atmosphere there. And I think other areas, open areas, need to be created in the city. Maybe the Sphinx Quarter will be the other one. It's not only buildings, it's also a mentality. If you look at the achievement of Studium Generale, of the parcours of arts and sciences that we'll have in 2 weeks, it also shows this really coming together. It's a spirit thing that we have to follow up, and I think then we are on the road of a knowledge city or a university city, whatever you call it, and it really needs to be in the heart and not on the wall of some railway station. After all this talk about external communities, about internationalization, we must not forget our internal community, and this is the students and the staff. And I think in this rat race of performance agreements and agendas, we must not forget that it's important to build a study and work environment that people that are here as part of this community can be proud of. And we had discussion in the last year on stress, on work-related issues, on careers, on transparency. We have listened to these comments and have set a number of things in motion, like a discussion on a new HRM policy. We have learned from the discussion of last year's opening academic year that we also put diversity on the agenda, bringing more young people into careers, having more female professors, and also further the diversity of our national versus international staff. We're also very happy that the finances related to the student loan system will go back to higher education. Our minister has announced that probably 4,000 new lecturers will be distributed in this system by this new financing. If we calculate this down to the University of Maastricht, it will be at least 150 new lecturer positions. And that in itself will contribute to also the work sphere, and it will be to the benefit of both our students, because there will be more time invested in education. There will also be more time for the employees to develop their skills, to develop their careers. Two last points that I think should be mentioned in our strategic program. One is value. And I deliberately don't say valorization, because that's not really an English word. It's a Dutch interpretation of an English word. We need to talk about value. What's the value that we offer as an institution? And I would say that education and research and internationalization and community is a value in itself. The discussion about valorization in this country has too much been dominated by the economic value. And this is one of the values that we can generate, but it's only one of them. The giving back to society, playing a societal role, also as an employer, but also as a knowledge institution, is a value that we should describe and that we should fill in our strategic program. And last but not least, sustainability. We are, I think, the only Dutch university that signed the agreement on sustainable universities in the last Rio summit on on sustainability and the environment. And I think it's also something we need to address in our new strategic program. We have installed the Green Office, a student-run initiative which looks at our ecological footprint, which also suggests projects, how we can make this university not only green, but also how we can be a sustainable investor and a sustainable institution. And I think that also should be addressed. So just some food for thought. As I said, this is a discussion that we want to have in the broadest sense. We will probably define the cornerstones in discussion with the deans and the managed deans, with the faculties, and then we like to go out to the community internally and externally to really get your ideas how we can bring this institution further as a university that is fit for the next 40 years without forgetting the spirit of the first 40 years that brought us here. Maybe the 40th anniversary is also a good moment to think about a new slogan or motto. As you know, we still have the motto, leading and learning, and there has been much discussion about that. And of course, generally we'll agree, it's much nicer if other people say about you that you are leading in something than you say it yourself. I have, a few years ago, with my colleagues, said jokingly, maybe a good slogan for this university would be stay okay. The problem is that this has been already taken up by another organization, and I think honestly, looking at the last 39 years or so, we should be a bit more ambitious, and we can afford to be a bit more ambitious, and this ambition should come as a part of our new strategic program. So this is all I have to say on this beautiful, warm, sunny day. I wish all of us, I wish you especially, that in this coming year you stay okay. No, I actually wish you a lot more than that, and that we continue to look successful in the future based on the achievements of the past. Thank you very much. Okay, a little over time. Anyway, it's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, and it is with our theme of community and community building. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Leo Penta, who has many different functions. He is a Catholic priest, originally from Brooklyn. He's a professor at the Catholic University of Applied Sciences in Berlin. He's also the founder of the German Institute of Community Organization, which is, as I've learned, also a movement, a global movement, community organizing, that is happening in many places, which is a movement that really brings, in an active way, community as a part of civil society into the blooming phase. And we're looking forward to his talk, Town, Gown and Beyond. What does community organizing really mean? Leo.
Esteemed members of the Executive Board, members of the faculty and staff, public officials, students, friends of the university, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Maastricht University for inviting me to give this lecture at your opening convocation, and like to extend a special thanks to President Martin Paul for encouraging me to take on this challenge today. When I put together the title for this talk, I didn't realize I would actually be wearing a gown. And town and gown is sort of the colloquialism that's used, at least in the United States, to talk about relationships between universities and the municipalities, cities, towns in which they are located. And this connects to community, and I want to connect it immediately because I want to start building some community right here. And I want to ask you to do something that may be a little bit strange for you in this context. I know those sitting in the first rows probably do know each other, but I'd like to ask you to look to the person next to you, behind you, in front of you, and maybe just greet them, tell them your name, and say hello. Okay, if I might call us back to order. This is dangerous because it can sometimes happen then that people get involved in conversations with one another, but that's not the worst thing in the world. I'll get to that a little bit later. But as we all know, I think the relationship between universities and the cities in which they reside, or what I've called here town and gown, is as old and varied as universities themselves. Their relationship is invariably complex and quite often controversial because at least four major constituencies interact. The mostly long-term, but also sometimes recently arrived residents of the locale in question, the governance of the town, both elected and administrative, the university with its own leadership and long-term infrastructure, and finally the students, who are much shorter-term constituents of both the town and the university. There is always power, and there is usually money involved in all of these interactions. There are any number of short and long-term interests that are continuously intersecting, some compatible with one another, many colliding, many more, in fact, perhaps not clear even to the actors themselves. My own experience with the relationship between town and gown was not very positive. When I was a student, I was at a campus at a university that was sort of a fortress in the midst of a neighborhood that was considered to be a no-go area. And there was almost no real contact between the university and the surrounding neighborhood. In fact, it was considered to be dangerous ground, and a number of my fellow students were in fact mugged on one of their excursions into the surrounding territory, so to speak. And when I was a professor later at another university, they didn't even bother to go into the city. They were located comfortably in the suburbs, but usually told their students not to take the short train ride into the city because that was a bad place. All the more reason, I think, to take up this question because it is certainly obvious that urban universities, on the one hand, can no longer consider themselves either safe havens or even oases or ivory towers exempt from the pressing issues of their locality. And by the same token, a locality can't simply act as if a university were not in its midst, especially when the university may be one of the main things that keeps a city or a town viable. Students, more than ever, are not just wards of the university and denizens of the library and classroom, if you will, but local citizens with a variety of allegiances. Yet they should and do move on after a relatively short time. Local citizens, both those well-established and some of the newer residents on the scene, usually see the university either as a boon or some as a bane to their life in the town. So just how do we get some sense of community out of this seemingly seething mass of constituencies and interests? And I'd like to offer some thoughts on this question from my perspective as a community organizer. But first, what exactly is a community organizer? To describe that, I'd like to borrow from a fellow community organizer, my mentor and the present co-director of the Industrial Areas Foundation in the United States, Mike Geekin. And he first begins by telling us in his book what he is not and what I am not, and what community organizers are not. Not a consultant, not a facilitator, not an advisor, not a service provider or a do-gooder, not an ideologue, not a political operator, not a pundit, not a progressive, not an activist. So who am I, and who are we organizers? We are people who understand human beings as political animals, and who thus are comfortable with words like leaders, power, action, even confrontation, negotiation, relationships, organizations, compromise. We are people who, as Hannah Arendt might have put it, figure out how to make collective action in the public realm not just the exception, and not just something done by professionals called politicians and elites. We are people who wrestle day in and day out with the challenge of building and nurturing a collective we in a world of me. I also often use the term in English, enabling community. In its ambiguity, I find also its strength. On the one hand, community, so far as it is realized, brings positive effects. I think everyone pretty much agrees on that, both for individuals and for our life together. But community, on the other hand, always needs to be enabled, needs to be built and rebuilt, organized, disorganized, reorganized. It is always a work in progress, more like a tent than a building, even though most of us are most comfortable in our permanent dwellings, whether they be our offices, our apartments, our labs, our shops, whatever. And so as a community organizer, I like the title of the program today, but especially the building part. We agree at some level that community is good, both personally and publicly in our shared life, even though we often don't agree on what it ought to look like. But again, how can there be community in a world full of diversity, and more specifically in the world of town and gown with its numerous constituencies, with both its places where they intersect and also with their controversies? And in answer, I'd like to follow at first a suggestion made recently by Luke Bretherton, a professor at Duke University, in a new book called Democracy, Faith, Citizenship, and the Politics of a Common Life. He contends that we are all part of what is called, or he calls, a community of fate. What I mean by this, he writes, is that in a world city, you do not choose either whom you live next door to or who lives in the next block or neighborhood. You find yourself living in proximity with people from whom you may be very different, whether individually or collectively. They may speak a different language, have different eating habits, or look at the world very differently. But whether one likes it or not, one shares the same fate as them. If the electricity is cut off, everyone loses power. If gangs rule the streets, everyone is under threat. And so the question, this is now me and not Bretherton, is the question for all groups becomes, how are we to be related? Not at all, blindly, haphazardly, or in a somewhat more strategic and planned fashion. And so now maybe it's clearer why I asked you to introduce yourselves to one another at the outset. With whom do you actively and consciously share this community of fate? Are you in some kind of relationship with others in this community of fate, especially those outside of your immediate group or environs? So I could have asked you to move around the hall and pick out someone or more persons whom you don't know, who are missing from the realm and the range of your relationships. And so the question is, with whom do you as part of institutions and part of the different constituencies need to build relationships in order to build community? It's not enough simply to live side by side, to live and let live. That's often what most of us, or maybe not most of us, but a lot of people think of as tolerance. And that, I think, misses the point of our shared fate. In fact, Sheldon Wolin, an American political philosopher, goes so far as to say quote, that the problem of the political is not to clear a space from which society is kept out, but it is rather to ground power in commonality while reverencing diversity, not simply respecting difference. Reverencing diversity, that's a very powerful phrase. This means, however, that community must be intentionally, purposely built, and I would say one relationship at a time almost. In contemporary society that is mobile, individualized, and in large part mediated, community cannot be assumed to already exist. This holds true even when people share the same space, the same place. And it is even more pronounced when at least a good portion of the people involved are transient. From the standpoint of community organizing, you build community through consistent practices, through habits, rather than merely through methods and techniques. This is important because there is always the age-old temptation to turn what is essentially political into something technical, into a mere set of methods and tools, to turn questions of practical judgment into technocratic models. The habits that I'll describe in a moment may seem to some here to be archaic in a digitalized world, to others too slow, and to others perhaps too direct and personal. But they are habits, in fact, that have consistently brought thousands of people together in neighborhoods and cities around the world to achieve positive change for the common good. And so I'd like to talk about three habits that are central to community organizing, and I would say central to all efforts at community building. They are the habits of relating, of acting together, and of organizing and disorganizing. The first and foremost habit is the habit of relating, of consciously building face-to-face relationships with others, especially with others who are other than I am, who are foreign or different. Those, perhaps, whether implicitly or consciously, I've been taught or pretend to keep arm's length from, or who keep arm's length from me. And of course, my own perceptions of foreign or different or other are conditioned by the social structuring of my own reality. What may be sameness for one is a world of difference for another. And this is where reverencing diversity really begins, from all sides of the diversity question, not only from the majority to the minority cultures. So relating is about crossing boundaries very directly, whatever they may be, of race, religion, income, education, status, ability, language, culture. Concretely, this habit entails then going out toward people and their institutions and associations and not waiting for them to come to you and not simply inviting them to partake in some program or offering or service that is available. That can be a beginning, but it certainly cannot be the end point, as I would understand it. Practically speaking, this means perhaps less flyers, less demonstrations, and less flash mobs, and more face-to-face conversations. To build a community organization, we usually do hundreds, if not thousands, of individual meetings with people throughout very diverse communities, whether it be in East Brooklyn, New York, or East London, in Neukölln and Wedding in Berlin, in the northwestern part of Cologne at the moment. And this means also in these conversations not looking only at facts and opinions, not polling, but asking people, in fact, what moves them, what their self-interests are, what makes them tick in their public lives. Not what you think, I think makes them tick, or what you think they ought to be, or I think they ought to be interested in. But what are they interested in? Because people generally follow their interests. That's where they put their time and energy. They may not be the interests that we think are the important ones, but everyone, I think, is interested in one or more things, even in their public lives. And so to do this, also, one has to be willing to get at some of their stories. What is it that shapes the lives of the person next to me and the person a little further away from me, or the person whom it takes a bit of challenge for me to get to know, and at the same time being willing to share a part of one's own story. in order to hear the stories of others. What gives them, what gives me energy? What makes them angry? What is their focus? What vision do they have for themselves, for their family, for their neighborhoods, or perhaps some institution or group to which they belong? Practicing this habit of relationship or relating means not using your issue, my issue, to mobilize others for a cause before we even know who these others are and what they are interested in. We often believe we are connected, and we all probably have a device in our pockets that wants to assure us and guarantee us that we are connected. But how many people are we really connected to in and around them as persons and their interests? I mean, ask yourself for a moment, with how many people sitting here in this room even people with whom you work, have you had a non-business conversation about something that was not business related or work related and was, on the other hand, not purely social or banal, but had something to do with interest, motivation, anger, energy, where people put their hearts to some extent? So at its core, this is the habit of reweaving, as it might be technically called, civil society through shared stories that articulate interests instead of prejudices and stereotypes. Self-interest, properly understood, as de Tocqueville would say, does not mean selfish interests. Rather, interests are literally in between us, and so can unite and bind us for action together. This is the work of creating a reservoir of bridging social capital, as Robert Putnam might call it. And it is real work, time-consuming and sometimes tedious, but also extremely energizing, and relational work that needs to be done before and sometimes even despite a crisis or the press of everyday issues and everyday life. Such work is the crucial step that, unfortunately, so many efforts for change and engagement tend to skip when they jump directly into issue and action. They often can mobilize, but can they really organize, particularly in a longer term and relational sense? And so now I'd like to ask you to do something again more than just listen. Please raise your hands. Who is from the university community but not a student? Just so we can get a picture. Wow, most of you. Who are the students here? Who are residents of Maastricht but not students? And who is none of the above? A few. So now that we know who's here, we could also ask the question, who's missing? Take a look around and maybe think about who might be missing. And how might you have gotten them here? And where might you look for them? And where might you have to go to meet with them? The second habit I'd like to talk about is the habit of action. Actively fostering new relationships across boundaries that otherwise divide is certainly good in itself, but not nearly enough. Another roundtable, intercultural festival, or Twitter storm is not really what I mean by collective action. It is the habit of being able to come together with others around shared self-interest in order, in fact, to move some issue or agenda that people have identified for themselves forward. The community of fate acting purposefully together becomes a political community prior to any party politics. As Bretherton writes, this kind of common life politics is distinct from an identity politics and from multicultural approaches because recognition and respect is not given simply by dint of having a different culture or identity. Rather, recognition is conditional on one's contribution to and participation in shared, reciprocal, and public work. And that means often bringing people together who usually don't come together and who usually don't have access to the places where decisions are being made. I once gave a talk and I won't mention which political party it was, to their foundation. And I was describing the process of community organizing in Berlin, and a question came, well, why do we need something like this where these folks from the neighborhoods get together and start asking sometimes very penetrating questions to their political leaders? I mean, you know, if we have a problem here in my neighborhood, I have the mobile number of the senator in my pocket, and I call up and everything is fine. And I could only reply by asking him whether, in fact, he thought the people in certain neighborhoods in Berlin even had a mobile phone at that time, or had the correct telephone number of the correct public official to call. And so it's a question, I think, also of how people, through the relationships that are built, can also take the initiative, in a certain sense, act preemptively and not just react to crises, but can identify for themselves what issues are and together address those other constituencies and groups who have a part in shaping what solutions might be. So ideally, it means sharing responsibility with public officials, administrators, corporate officials, and creating new partnerships that serve the whole community or the whole municipality, the whole of society better. Sometimes it also means holding other people accountable to the community of fate. Accountability means that there can and will be nonviolent conflict and confrontation, but it also means that conflict arises around issues that are less ideological and based more on shared self-interest. When legitimate interests on both sides are clearly stated and pursued in the context of the community of fate, they are most often conflicts amenable to negotiation and positive compromise. And the habit of public action that I describe is neither cynical nor naive about power. It takes power and actors who act powerfully seriously. They analyze it. They map it out. And they also know that power comes in many forms, and that one of them is the power generated by people acting together, a kind of power with rather than the power over that we generally experience in many spheres of our lives. It is this new experience of power with that energizes people, creates real change, and develops leaders from among those perhaps whom society does not very often see as the source of new leadership. The final habit, the habit of organization, can be summed up in the phrase that we use in organizing very much: all organizing is disorganizing and reorganizing. And once again, I'd like to ask you to do something active, although not raising your hands this time, but reflecting for a moment. Think about what mediating institutions you might be part of outside of your immediate work. A civic institution, a club, a sports team, a religious group, a union, an initiative. Why do you stay a member? Again, a rhetorical question. On the other hand, think of maybe one of those mediating institutions that you have left. Why? What are the reasons that you have left that mediating institution, have withdrawn your activity or your engagement? We know there's a need for longer-term frameworks of organization also in civil society. The business world, the political world, the academic world have these. And as we heard before, also constantly need to reflect and discuss what the parameters of them are. But also civil society needs to do, if you will, this kind of homework and reflection. And as an organizer, I would immediately add that such organizations need to be built, of course, around relationships and common action, not around formalities, bureaucracies, committees, hierarchies, and all of the forms that we usually put before the functions. This means they need to be more inclusive and more representative of those probably not in the room today. And from this, it also follows that existing mediating institutions need to do a good deal of healthy disorganizing and reorganizing so that they can energize people, not drain them, engage new leaders, find new leaders, and not do more of the same with less and less of the same old leaders. A word perhaps about the student constituency. Because of its relative transiency, it is perhaps the one most difficult to organize. What I heard this morning was extremely encouraging about initiatives taken by students, by members of the civic community in Maastricht. There's a lot of spontaneous coming together, and that's very positive. The question is, how can some of that be maintained as students, as leaders come and go? Student leaders need to look for their successors even before almost they become leaders. And how do student groups deal with this? And what can the university do to help? Perhaps to offer a framework for organizing practice without predetermining either student engagement or community interests. Perhaps just again a personal story, some of the words that come again and again to me that were said by Martin Paul when he was the dean of the medical school in Berlin, and we were building a broad-based community organization in the Wedding neighborhood, a neighborhood in which the Charité has a very, very large clinic. And the fact that the Charité sees hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens or inhabitants of Wedding every single day. But when the Charité as organization wants to talk to the neighborhood, to Wedding, who does it call? Who's there? Certainly, you can call City Hall, you can call public officials and administration, but who represents in some way the civil society of a neighborhood, of a city, in a more unified kind of fashion, and is able across the board, at least to some extent, to stand for the whole, as we would call it in community organizing, and be able to be a vis-a-vis for the other institutions in society. And so there's one further related question I'd like to pose to you, as I used the image before. Who are the tent builders among you? Who are the ones who day in and day out would like to weave people and organizations into webs of relationships capable of acting together for the betterment of this community of fate? Who are the community organizers in Maastricht, at the university, in the city? And so allow me in conclusion a few concrete suggestions for moving beyond the gap between town and gown. The first is, think relationships before program. Always build relationships first and build them around interests. Do this before setting up programs, whether from government, university, administration, or even, I would suggest, from students. Secondly, get into relationship with people by talking to them about their interests, not simply by surveying them and polling them. Don't just assume you know them or their interests, and try to find, as I would call it here, the folks who are not usually in the room. Thirdly, act not just for, but also with people. Service is important, advocacy is important, but a further step is bringing people together so that they can act on their own behalf and on behalf of a greater good. And especially do that with people who seem on the surface sometimes to be more the problem than the solution. Fourthly, provide training and mentoring for students and members of the academic community who wish to engage more directly with building relationships and fostering common action. And again, do this with a mind not just toward serving the less fortunate, but also toward enabling them to be active shapers of their own communities. And finally, consider developing a long-term and broadly based network of civil society groups that can mediate the short-term nature of student involvement with long-term interests of local residents, the university, and other stakeholders. And perhaps this is a task for which the university could be the base and the convener. The challenge of a lively and relevant democracy is not only a challenge on the national and the world stage, it is first and perhaps even foremost a challenge of building civil and political community at the local level in a diverse polity. Neither public administration nor markets can achieve this alone. Only a relational and active civil society, an enabled and enabling community, has a real chance of building community. Thank you for your attention.
Leo, thank you very much for this stimulating talk. I think it's probably also the beginning of a conversation to be continued. As you pointed out, this is a global movement. Maybe it's also a good way, and Maastricht could be at the forefront of having, maybe also think about an Institute of Community Organizing for the Netherlands, and it's something indeed to be continued. Ladies and gentlemen, we had now some talks, some words, some food for thought, and probably need some time to think, and I would like to call now also to a musical interlude. And music also has the ability to connect people. We are very proud this year to have an ensemble of the South Netherlands Philharmonic. You know, when I was in Berlin as a dean, we always had these festivities, and I always invited a band that was called the 17 Hippies from Kreuzberg, but we only had money to pay 4 of them. So I said only 13 are sick today. But actually, no, we have today an ensemble of 14 musicians of an ensemble of 110, and not the other ones are sick because they are an important subsegment that represent a part of a very special project. It's called Spicy Classics, and it's an attempt to really move a classical symphony orchestra closer to a younger public. So they give us a little sample of that. Because we are a young university, right, we need to be part of a younger public. And this ensemble of 14 musicians, conducted by Eric Bosgraaf, will play from Vivaldi's Four Seasons, Spring and Summer. We had a sample of that when we came in. And the sound design is by Jorrit Taminga. The video that was also made to support this was made by Paul and Menno Donoya. Can I have your applause for the ensemble of the South Netherlands Philharmonic?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank very much Erik Bosgraaf and the ensemble for the South Netherlands Philharmonic for this incredible prelude, which was, I think, extremely striking and really interesting. The full Spicy Classics concert, by the way, will be presented in the Muziekgieterij on Wednesday, October 14th. I would now like to proceed with the presentation of the 2015 Student Award. By granting the Student Award, Maastricht University recognizes outstanding cultural or social achievements by students or groups of students. The nominees for the 2015 Student Award will be presented in a short video.
Welcome to the 2015 Maastricht University Student Award. The nominees are the Food Bank Maastricht, for making people aware of how much food is wasted, why food is wasted, and what they can do about it. Royals Club Association, for trying to bring business students from all over Europe closer together through sports. LGBT Student Community Maastricht, for organizing several social events, including the 2015 International LGBT Student Day. Lisa Rotz, for trying to get organizations like SBE to adapt to the learning opportunities of the 21st century. Green Office, for setting up an ambitious and specific sustainability policy for UN until 2030. Universities Allied for Essential Medicines, an organization dedicated to promoting the global affordability and availability of medicines. Fiscal Study Association, First Maastricht, for providing free assistance to anyone needing help in filing tax returns. Aurelia Streit of the Student and Society Initiative, for coordinating the Refugee Project Maastricht, together with COA and In Between. Leopold Traugott and Alexander Medget, the founders of the first and only European student television network known as Campus Europe. Carolyn Winter, for coordinating Student Forum Maastricht and organizing the Student Forum Conference in Brussels in April 2015.
As you could see, we had a lot of nominations, and congratulations to all nominees, and also thank you for being here with us today. This year, the jury had a difficult time choosing a winner from these very different nominees. So the jury felt that besides the winner, two of the nominees deserved an honorable mention, even it's only here in our surroundings. And these are, first, the University Allied for Essential Medicines, Maastricht, and second, the Food Bank Maastricht. But the winner of the 2015 Student Award is Aurelia Streit. Aurelia couldn't be here with us because she's doing her exchange semester in Hong Kong, but you already saw a picture this morning, by the way, in some of the presentations which were given there on community building. And so we have here Melissa Paasen as her representative. Melissa, come standing next to me. Melissa is a member of the Student and Society Initiative. She already talked this morning about the Student and Society Initiative, which together with In Between enabled Aurelia Streit to start her project. And so why does Aurelia Strait deserve this 2015 Student Award? Aurelia has played a key role in setting up subcommittees for the refugee project Maastricht, so that refugees, students and citizens could share stories, learn from each other and learn Dutch, explore the city of Maastricht and even become friends. Aurelia also helped the children of the Asylum Seeker Center in Limmel to play and discover things they may not ordinarily have seen. Totally committed to the project, Aurelia applies herself happily, willingly, and professionally. Let's give Aurelia a big hand. And of course, congratulations also to her parents and her brother who are here today with us. Melissa, thank you for accepting the award on behalf of Aurelia Strait. Let me put that is for her. It is now with great pleasure that I proceed to the awarding of the Edmund Hustings Prize for Science. To be eligible, the research proposal must be of significant scientific importance, internationally oriented, and it must be relevant and applicable to practice. Maastricht University is indebted to the Edmund Hustings Foundation for this prize. May I invite Peter Frenet, President of the Foundation, to the stage to announce the winner.
Thank you, Professor Zoete. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's winner of the Edmund Hustings Prize is researching in what way people adapt new biomedical technologies in a context of shifting and competing understandings of health, citizenship and well-being. Those self-tracking technologies are hot in the fast-developing medical world. Would, for example, a mood scope help? It's a small device which has been developed in the UK. You can map your mental condition yourself on a daily basis. So how do I feel today? Am I scared, thrilled? Or do I dare to go out or prefer to stay in bed? What are the chances and benefits, the limits, or even the threats of such technology? And is it great that the patient could share these data via the social media with the body or others suffering from the same disease or deficit? Based on these data, your body can decide in which direction to take action to help. Talking about solidarity. It's indeed the case that this technology in healthcare is contributing to changes in the patient's conduct simply because someone is paying specific attention to you. Let me quote what the jury wrote about the prize winner in its report. She has rapidly built a national and international name as evidenced by her numerous ties with international, interdisciplinary networks and research groups. While visiting researcher at King's College, she helped to initiate the Citizen Participation in Science and Medicine Network. This testifies to the great societal relevance of her work. Policymakers all over the world have put their hopes on personalized healthcare as a way to keep healthcare sustainable. For this hope to materialize, however, it is paramount that we understand how citizen users integrate these new technologies and how values like solidarity and autonomy are adapted to the new context. The €15,000 prize will allow her to map a preliminary overview of the Googleization of medical research. She herself will tell you more in about a minute. I have now the privilege to announce that the Edmund Hustings Prize for Science, Maastricht's most prominent scientific award, has been won by one of your most talented researchers from the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, Dr. Tamar Sharon. You will meet her now in a short video presentation.
My name is Tamar Sharon. I work at the philosophy department at FASOS, where I study the social implications of new and emerging healthcare technologies. Medical research has entered an exciting new era of big data, based on the ability to collect and analyze vast amounts of data. But today's big data experts, they aren't university scientists. They're consumer tech companies. Companies like Google, Apple, IBM, and Microsoft, these companies all promise to revolutionize medical research. The Edmund Hustings Prize will allow me to explore the ethical and social implications of what we might call the Googleization of medical research today. Who will be in control of the big data research agenda when a handful of corporations with clear commercial interests, start not only storing and analyzing medical data, but also shaping medical research itself? These are crucial questions that I think we need to be asking ourselves at this critical moment when we're moving into an era of big data in medical research.
Dr. Sharon, on behalf of the board of the Edmund Hustings Foundation, I would like to warmly congratulate you on this prize. We all hope that it will contribute to realizing your scientific ambitions. Please give Ms. Sharon another time a warm applause.
It's a special moment for every opening of an academic year that, first of all, I have to declare the academic year officially opened, which I do now, and in my worst dreams I imagine what would happen if I won't do that. But also we have this tradition that it's now the time to perform the unofficial anthem of this university. As you know, and I tell you these are the new ones amongst us, it is the final chorale from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode an die Freude. As I've said, it's a nice motto, alle Menschen werden Brüder. I added earlier on, or Schwestern, to be correct. And we have also in the last years developed tradition that we always get different interpretations of this piece. So I'm looking forward now to hear the interpretation of the South Netherlands Philharmonic to musically open this new academic year with Ode an die Freude. Ladies and gentlemen, this closes our ceremony of this year. I think we had a lot of good thoughts, good ideas. I would also like to thank Professor Penta again. Imagine what would happen if all of us in the next few days and weeks would reach out to somebody we don't know and we don't know what they do. Then we probably have a good start of building this community further. I think it's a theme that should stay with us in the following academic year and also in our, I wouldn't say next 40 years, but certainly should be an important part of our joint strategy. And to enhance the community spirit even further, I would like to invite you on behalf of the Executive Board, Luc Soete and Nick Bos, to a reception in the foyer. Then we can already make the first steps in this process. Please stay in the room and give us the opportunity that the procession of the professors, the cortege, leads you and us in this new academic year. And with this, I close this academic ceremony.